What's up, summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. In this video we are going to talk about something very important: jungle pathing and how to avoid getting farmed by the enemy jungler. And not only that, it might give you some idea what you can expect from your own jungler. Even though you'll most of the time be disappointed anyway, cause you know, junglers. The very first path is the most typical jungle clear path we are used to seeing, especially in the Asian regions. The goal behind this clear is to safely clear the jungle camps and potentially sneak a gank mid lane. But its typical ideal goal is to secure level 3 in the most safe manner and split into a direction to guarantee a safe scuttle crab. By doing this, you basically avoid any kind of risk of getting caught off guard because nobody can match the clear speed of just doing 2 camps into a mid lane transition. However, you need to be very careful to not get engaged into the middle lane or do something very stupid there, because depending on what you're doing there and how much HP you're losing, you might have to give up a scuttle crab. So as a laner, to avoid dying to something cheesy like this, be very sure that you have either vision early on or hug the side of your map. Don't get engaged or don't give a free kill away to the enemy jungle, because if that happens, your jungler already lost the game. Because kill experience is just broken, and therefore the enemy jungle will have an easy time dealing with your jungle in the future. And before we continue with the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and reply to a question of the day in the comments below. As for our question of the day, tell me about your experience with the jungler. When do you usually get viciously assaulted by the enemy jungler, and what does your jungler usually do? The next clear path we have is designed to split the map into 2 parts. With this, we are trying to play around a specifically strong lane or empower lanes we want to have strong throughout the early stages of the game. So ideally, we start with the red buff, do the chickens, the crocs, transition to the crab and go for the gromp. Depending on what is happening on the map, we can even make a split-second decision and go from the crab to the closest lane. And to know where you have to specifically look, whenever you're close to a lane, this lane has priority in terms of camera management. It doesn't really matter what is happening on the other side of the map in terms of priority. You need to know what is happening immediately around you so you can respond fast enough. And logically speaking, you can't respond fast enough to what is happening on the other side of the map. As a rule of thumb, however, whenever the enemy and the allied portraits overlap on the minimap, you should take a look. And whenever you think of doing something in the future, for example if you're kiting the crab towards a lane you want to go, that's the play you need to make. You don't want to kite the crab into a direction you don't want to go, because that would be wasting your time. However, if this clear path works out as we want it to, as we finish with the gromp, we'll be level 5 and behind the enemy tower. Which means that if our laners are aware of the situation, and we are also prepared to go for a dive, we might as well do so. Because doing such a thing will push your lane and yourself so much ahead that the game will be almost won, at least in a solo queue context. Simply because people will tilt after this one play. The next clear we are talking about is a bit more risky. It's specifically designed for champions who can clear 4 camps before scuttle crab. And here we start with the red buff, into the chickens, into the wolves and then into the gromp. You might ask me, why the gromp? The gromp is significantly less tankier than the blue buff. For one, it has less HP, and for second, it has no armor, which immediately results in us killing it faster. However, this clear would only make the difference if we'd end up at scuttle crab before it spawns. Because blue buff in the early game doesn't grant you anything valuable in that sense. It grants you a little bit of mana regen, and it grants you HP regen when you're out of combat. However, it only starts after being out of combat for a long time, and it's only missing HP. Which means the healthier you are, the more useless it is. However, the evolved blue buff grants 20 ability haste and an increased amount of regeneration. But in the early stages of the game, we don't want to spend too much time on the map anyways, and to regen full with this buff would take longer than recalling and walking back to where we were before, which would be another way of losing time. So with this clear, we're opening up ourselves a lot of options to be active on the map. From the scuttle crab on, we would be level 5 and we'd be able to influence the middle lane, and depending on the side we're on, either the dragon lane or the baron lane. However, we're also presented with the option to go for the enemy crocs to get some more golden XP if there's nothing else we can do. However, this is probably the most risky path you can take, so if your champion isn't strong enough to allow you to do so, or you're facing champions that are very strong early on, you should very much be careful about what you want to do. because doing this and failing to execute it will most likely lead to a defeat in the jungle. Because once the enemy jungler is ahead and knows what you're doing and knows what your options are, he is gonna sit in your jungle 24/7. And since you know solo queue, nobody's gonna pay attention and nobody's gonna help you, even if you ping. Because there's one thing people don't understand in solo queue. Pinging people for assistance or danger usually should tell them that there's something wrong. However, if they don't see the immediate danger, as in the enemy champion on literally your screen or the minimap, they will not react in any kind of way. And next up comes a similar clear that does red buff into chickens into the blue buff. The reason for this is, if we can only clear free camps, we might as well clear the blue buff. Because there's no reason not to if we are not losing any time. Because having the buff is substantially better than not having the buff. Afterwards we are going for the Scuttle Crab and then go towards the enemy Crux. With that we'll hit level 5 again and we'll be once again behind the enemy turret and maybe in a position to get the enemy killed. But now let's take this clear one step further. We take into account that the enemy team has specific wards and we want to avoid those wards. So it's very hard in solo queue, especially there, to place down specific wards that show all the required information, and exactly that is something we're going to abuse. Wards show limited areas, and by carefully observing the map and the movement of the enemy champions, we can rather pinpoint where the most likely placed wards are. And taking that into consideration, we can adjust our pathing in a very smart manner and get the enemy killed. So think of the clear again. We do red buff, chickens, blue buff, and then the Scuttle Crab. But now, rather than walking upwards, we walk into the enemy jungle. We walk to the Crux from behind, from basically inside the enemy jungle, clear the Crux and wait on the edge of the Crux. Because if we think about this, it's very likely that the Tri-Brush or the River Brush are warded, but staying there will not show us. So we are just waiting for the enemy to overcommit or use a vital cooldown and then we pounce. And once we're there, there's little chance that the enemy is going to survive, because we are level 5 and that's usually the deal breaker. And now let's talk about Lee Sin and how to avoid Lee Sin as an early game jungler. Lee Sin has the ability to just do one camp into another camp and then spam invade you. For this, all he has to do is red buff into chickens and then he has multiple choices available. For one, he can just jump over the pit into the Herald or Baron pit and then walk towards your either wolves or blue buff. The other way would simply walking through the river. However, especially if you are a 4 camp clearer, you need to be very careful when you do your wolves. Because it's very likely that the Lee Sin is going to invade your wolves because he expects you to be there. And there's nothing you can do about this. So what can you do to avoid this? Number 1, you can place down specific wards. For example, the entrance of your jungle or the entrance of the Baron pit. Number 2, you can start in your own blue side jungle. With this, you'll avoid this problem completely. And since most junglers don't even understand or realize that you can start with a blue buff in this game, they'll be caught off guard and lose a lot of time. The other available option would be a red side full clear. So we do red buff, chickens, Crux and transition into the Scuttle Crab in the river and the enemy jungle. But whatever you end up doing, there's 2 wards you should place, or rather your team should place, which is already a hard task in solo queue because you can't do the job on your own. One is in the river and the other one is around the Baron pit. With those 2 wards, it will be impossible for the Lee Sin to sneak into your jungle without you knowing. Which means, as you see him transition into your jungle, you can safely transition into his bottom side jungle. And once you survive that, well, the game is at least looking a bit better for you. And next up, we have something very important for all of you. It's the proper vision setup in the earlier stages of the game. It's more of like a default setup. As you see on this screen, you have the wards at the chicken or close to the river on both sides, and depending on what lane you're on, either the Baron or the Dragon lane, a ward in the Tri-Brush. With those wards, it's impossible to not notice the enemy jungle to go anywhere close to your jungle. Of course, it's a bit different if the enemy can jump over walls. Those wards would also protect us from a cheesy level 2 gank mid lane and grant us the ability to play properly. And how do we play properly around vision? If we have established vision on a side, we can lean towards it, because if we see somebody come from that side, we can immediately respond and get away early enough. However, if we are leaning away from the warded side, we'll just get killed from behind, because we don't have enough time to respond. It's just impossible. And if you don't have any vision, but you still have to kind of overextend, you should by default lean towards your jungle, because it's substantially more likely that you are able to get help if you're doing this. Because if you're leaning away from him, how is he supposed to help you? The only way for you to get towards him would be running through the enemy, which means you'd be potentially dying, which is not really a good thing to do. What you also have to keep in mind is that those wards will keep you safe from those level 2 cheesy junglers. Don't forget that jungling in this game is substantially different from League PC. Farming is not as rewarding as it is on PC League. You get so much XP and gold for a kill, which is unbelievably too much. Let's be honest. Therefore you'll see a lot of flippers trying to level 2 gank you at any point in the game. And since it's solo queue, it will work a lot and give them the illusion that this is the right play. However, it can't be the right play if the counterplay is literally just placing a ward down without any cost. And once you've done so, they lose so much time. And if your jungler is a fast clearing jungler, it will actually matter. And another thing, as a general rule of thumb, if your jungler is on the other side of the map and you don't have any information on the enemy jungle, and you cannot confidently say that you're able to 2v3 them, just don't play. Just relax and wait for something to happen or appear on the map and then go back to playing. It's not worth the risk throwing the game away because you feel like making a play. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you're notified when tomorrow's video goes live. See you then.